Hello and welcome to The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. I'm your host, Allison Weiss, and I am so pleased to bring you today's conversation with Melina Cordero. Melina is on a mission to make the working world a better place, starting with leadership. A trailblazer in modern leadership development, she helps organizations transform through practical, research-based strategies that turn bold visions into tangible outcomes. As the founder of P20 Leadership, Melina designs cutting-edge leadership development programs tailored for emerging leaders in industries navigating rapid change and rising expectations for leadership support, like commercial real estate. Her work is built on a simple but urgent belief that better leaders don't just make work better for people, they drive performance, innovation, and long-term success for organizations. With over a decade of experience as a global executive in commercial real estate, Melina brings a rare blend of analytical rigor, cultural fluency, and grounded practicality. She's known for turning ideas into actions, bringing down complex concepts into practical strategies. A believer in the idea that little hinges swing big doors, she shows leaders how small strategic shifts can unlock lasting cultural change. Melina works with individuals and organizations through her Leadership Institute, P20 Leadership, and her broader advisory practice. Whether building emerging leader pipelines or guiding executive teams through culture and strategy shifts, her goal is always the same: to drive real impact for both people and business, embedding leadership as a lever for performance, equity, and organizational growth. She shares these insights not only through her work with clients, but also by delivering keynotes and leading conversations at company and industry events. Her talks focus on leadership, culture, and the future of work, offering fresh perspectives and practical direction. Her clients span industries from tech to nonprofits to commercial real estate. A bicultural Latina, Melina has lived in 4 countries and speaks 3.5 languages, plus a smidge of Italian. She holds degrees from Yale Sciences, Po Paris, and the London School of Economics. She's a sought-after speaker, podcast guest, and thought leader in inclusive leadership, organizational strategy, and the future of work, and she is amplifying her message across industries and global stages. In today's conversation with Melina, we will cover a wide range of topics, including her transition from a rising leader in executive within one of the biggest firms in commercial real estate to entrepreneurship, how she transitioned and what she's doing to help others when they transition from corporate to their next role, whether that's in a company, as an entrepreneur, or to take a break. She also will talk to us about how speaking has impacted her personal career and her journey. And also, Melina will also cover the P20 Leadership program, which is open for enrollment now, and all of the different ways that this program can impact the middle tier of leaders within our organizations. It is a wonderful, wide-ranging conversation, and I am so happy that you're here to join us on this week's episode of The Spotlight, a Women in CRE podcast. Let's listen in. Hello and welcome, Melina Cordero, to The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. We are so happy to have you here.
It's so good to be in the spotlight. It's been a while.
I feel like you are someone who's very comfortable in the spotlight, and we'll talk a little bit about how you got there. But I'd love for us first to start by talking a little bit about your career story. So can you walk us through that journey and how you wound up to where you are today?
Oh, yeah. My career story is probably similar to a lot of people's career stories where it was lots of different winding, twisting turns. Nothing happened as planned at all. I fell into commercial real estate really accidentally. I graduated during the recession. I took the first job I could get, and that happened to lead me into commercial real estate, retail specifically. I ended up really enjoying several aspects of which I ended up enjoying. Others not so much, but we'll talk about that. I always joke that from the second that I stepped into the industry, I feel like I accidentally fell up the corporate ladder. I kept just going up and growing and growing. People would say, oh my goodness, you're so ambitious and you're so this and that. And I was like, I didn't really mean to do this, but I was always a hard worker. I always got along with people. I had a lot of things that helped me along the way and amazing sponsors and mentors. Of course, I definitely didn't do any of this alone. But I found myself at the young age of 32 managing a very senior level position at the largest firm in the world in commercial real estate. We all know who it is. And I was leading a team of 500 plus brokers across the country who were mostly male. And so here I am, this young thing, a woman who's half the age, half the size, all the differences you can think of. And I had never been a broker either, which is the new thing for all of a sudden someone managing brokers to not be a broker. Myself there, and it was a whirlwind, and it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And then the pandemic hit, and it became even more challenging, right?
Yeah.
What happened for me during the pandemic was it was a really special, important time for all of us in good ways and bad ways. And for me, it really allowed me, as I was always running around. I was on planes, as you mentioned, in the spotlight, on stages and conferences. And for the first time, I was just grounded in my apartment alone. And I had to face some things. I was like, I don't think this is for me. It looks great on paper. The money's fantastic. The spotlight's shiny, but I'm not really feeling it. And so then came the process of what am I feeling? What do I want? And right around that time is also when a lot of things were changing, right? We were going through the pandemic. Black Lives Matter was really helping us confront some things. I think we as an industry and many of the companies were also looking internally and confronting some things about what's not really fair, who's having a harder time. And it made me reflect so much on my experience in the industry because it was hard. And I knew it was harder for me than it was for a lot of other people. And I knew it was harder for most women than anybody else. And that all is a long-winded way of saying it all came together for me. And I said, I think that is what is my thing. And I think that's what I'm passionate about. So I threw in my resignation in April of 2021. And I said, I'm going to go figure out how to make this industry and other industries like it more fair, more welcoming, better places to work, and places where everybody can grow and thrive in the way that I felt I had, but with slightly less suffering, which I had also done. So that's my goal, because I think if we can make our organizations and our industries better workplaces, more welcoming environments where everybody really feels that they can grow, it only makes for better companies. It makes for better people, happier people. And so that's what I do. I say, I want to make the working world a better place. And that's what I do. So I'm doing it.
I love it. And I know you chose a very special name, P20 Leadership. Can you tell us about that and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, people always ask me, P20 stands for post 2020. So it's very personal to my journey, right? Because for me, everything changed in 2020, right? I changed my career. I changed my life. I changed my focus. I changed a lot of things. For me, a lot of my work, which I focus on leadership development in the industry, is everything changed in 2020, and we have to change too. So the old rules don't apply anymore, and neither do the old tools. So what are the tools we need to equip ourselves and our teams with in order to move forward? We talk about hybrid workplace. We talk about AI. We talk about the fact that leaders have to be a lot more human than they had to be 5 or 10 years ago, right? If you look at global and political events, CEOs didn't really even have to respond to that 5 years ago, and now they do. So challenge of being a leader today is very different than it was before 2020, and that is the idea behind P20, that we need post 2020 tools for the post 2020 workplace.
I love it. And before we move on to some of the work that you're doing today, I just want to harken back for just a second to talk about the leaving story. Everyone has a different experience. And I know that this is something too that you care a lot about, is helping people to disconnect, detach, and to transition really gracefully from one thing to the next. Tell us about how you did that and also what you're working on to help people do the same.
Oh my goodness. I did that with a lot of support. It was not an easy thing to do. you have a career, you have financial stability. And especially if you don't come from that, if you didn't grow up with a
Yes.
lot of money, as
Yes.
I didn't, my family never had a lot of money, right? To
Same.
walk away from a steady paycheck that keeps me safe, that
Yep.
was hard, right? And the whole process, like front to back, took 3 years for me to be like, "I'm
Mhm.
gonna do it. No, I'm not. I'm gonna do it. No, I'll take the promotion instead." And it's like that, right? It's
Mhm.
never a clear
Yeah.
thing. So I presented it like, "I threw in my resignation and I was done." No. It took a long time, a lot of reflection. I had an amazing leadership executive coach who helped
Mhm.
me not only be good at my job, but also helped me connect with what I wanted out of my
Mhm.
career and out of my life. So that was indispensable to me. And I had the support of friends and family, which unfortunately not everyone gets with a decision like that. So I
Mhm.
was fortunate with that.
Yes.
I'm really passionate, as much as I'm passionate about making our organizations better, I'm also
Mhm.
really passionate about helping us as individuals be happier in our work lives. And a lot of times that means leaving where we are. I know that
Mhm.
lots of people out
Mhm.
there know that. And I know how difficult it was to disengage all of those questions
Mhm.
of, but what about the money? And what if there's not something better? And what if I
Mhm.
regret it? And what will people think? And I'm going to lose
Mhm.
this title. And there go my American Airlines points. All of the things that you think of.
Sure.
Because yes, I fly
Mhm.
coach now. I do.
Yes.
All those little things and big things that just you're just like, "Oh, it's too much. I can't." On top of probably you're probably exhausted doing your day job. I
Mhm.
am really passionate about helping people work through that, and you don't do it alone. And so I have a special project, it's gonna be on Substack called Quit Camp that I'm launching actually in 2 weeks, which is very exciting. Separate from my work with leadership development, and it's
Mhm.
focused on individuals and helping people disengage from the jobs they
Mhm.
don't like. That doesn't mean you need to go and start a business. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
you not need to take an entire year off, but there's something really empowering in
Mhm.
walking away from something that is not serving you. So
Yes.
that's what I wanna help people do.
I love it. And I'm so glad you talked about this push pull feeling that you had for years and years because I had that experience as well. My experience too has been that if you don't follow the signs and if you don't take action yourself, the universe takes action upon you and it might not be in the ways that you like. And that was more my story and the way that I transitioned out of corporate. So I do love this idea of going through a process and being really intentional in how you show up and leveraging your network and doing all of these things. So I'm so glad that you're helping people through that because I think, it oftentimes on the outside looks like someone just pulled a ripcord and it was so unexpected and maybe it wasn't well thought out or well planned out. And I understand deeply that feeling of this is not fulfilling me anymore and I need to move on. And I love that you are helping people to take the leap, whether it's into entrepreneurship, into their next role, into some time off to evaluate. I love all of that. So, talk to us a little bit about public speaking and the spotlight because this is the theme of the podcast. I'd love to understand what role speaking has played in your leadership development and kind of the career growth that you've experienced thus far.
Public speaking, presentations, communication in general, but really more specifically public speaking and presentations played an absolutely critical part in my career, and I don't think we talk enough about the role that it plays and it can play growth. This was an accidental journey. I didn't wake
Mhm.
up one day and go, "You know what? I would love to get on a stage and have the spotlight and have a mic and have 200 people staring at me and a presentation." No, I never wanted that. But what happened was because my career in commercial real estate started out in research, it was a natural thing that I was getting invited to be on a panel. And then I was
Mhm.
invited to be a keynote or a speaker at an ICSC event. More people saw me speaking and I wasn't terrible at it. I would get more invites. Companies would be like,
Mhm.
"Hey, we have a company away day. Can you come speak? Webinar, this, that." And all of a sudden, I was seen as this speaker, a thought leader on a topic. I was getting invites all the time, and it did a couple things for me that I didn't realize until down the line is it gave me a lot of visibility at a very young age, right? So I was getting
Mhm.
up there. So it gave me a lot of visibility because if you think you get up on stage and you're in front of, let's say, 50 people, or you do a webinar and you're in front of
Mhm.
30 people. It's 30 people who now know your
Mhm.
name, know your expertise, and remember you. Then those 30 people may think of you for a future event that maybe they're
Mhm.
coordinating, right? And so it goes from there. I run into someone maybe I haven't personally met and they say, oh, I remember you from XYZ. So from a visibility standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. From a credibility standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really amazing, right? You have to do a good job. That's when you can't get
Sure.
up there and skip around and then hop off. But from a credibility standpoint, it really helped me establish authority on a topics. And it helped me confidence wise, really build up my confidence of, yeah, I know this is my topic. This is my subject matter. And building relationships. Through that kind of public speaking experience, I had very senior executives who hesitated for not 1 second to invite me
Mm-hmm.
into a board meeting, to invite
Mm-hmm.
me into a room with very high level clients, to invite me to speak to those clients. And so it was also from a business development perspective incredibly beneficial because they knew I could perform, right? So it was incredibly pivotal to my career for those reasons.
I love it. And I think that there's this myth out there that there are natural born speakers and then there are people who can't speak, and that there's no opportunity in the middle for development. Can you talk a little bit about that and where you fell on the spectrum when you began, what you're working on today?
I can talk a lot a bit about that because there is a myth. I love that you use that word. There is a myth in the same way that there's a myth around leadership that you're either born a great
Mm-hmm.
leader or you're not. Leadership, interestingly, is 70% learned and
Mm-hmm.
30% innate. And it's very similar with public speaking. It's primarily built. And what I hear all the time is, oh, I'm just not a speaker. I don't like the stage. I don't like the attention. I'm not a
Yes.
speaker. I'm just not, I get nervous, whatever. Everybody does. There is no speaker on this planet who does not get nervous when they get up on a
Mm-hmm.
stage. I have been on a stage, I don't know how many times. I still get the jitters. I
Mm-hmm.
still don't sleep well the night before. And I know
Mm-hmm.
people who have been doing this for much longer than me and who do stages much bigger than mine who still get really nervous and they practice and they practice and they run through and they ask questions and they forget things. When I was at CBRE, we had this really amazing woman who was a keynote for a
Mm-hmm.
women's network event. She was incredible. She had written a book about storytelling and she did keynotes all over the world. She got on stage and you could tell she was on fire. But I remember observing her before and after, and I saw that she had these sorts of rituals that she was doing. Like she wouldn't talk to anyone. She had to have her own space. Like I watched her going through everything. Like she had her process and she,
Mm-hmm.
I am sure, was filled with nerves going up, but she was incredible. And so being nervous, 77% of people have what's called public speaking anxiety. If everybody were to use the excuse that they get nervous, we wouldn't have no speakers anywhere. So it's not about waiting until you're not nervous. It's about learning how to work through the nerves, and it comes with practice. But I get nervous about my PowerPoints.
Yes. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think back to maybe health class or science class for some of us, there's this idea of stress. And then there's also a more positive version of stress called eustress. And it's the stress that encourages us to perform and to raise our game and to do that preparation, to know our content and really to equip ourselves with everything that we need. And so I think those two types of stress don't necessarily feel the same. Anxiety in our body can sometimes feel like, oh, I'm so nervous. Excitement is, I'm nervous, but I'm really looking forward to the outcome. We need to differentiate and try to harness those feelings because 77%, I'm almost surprised that it's not higher than that. I'd love to meet these magical 23% of people that never get nervous because I certainly still get nervous and trip over my first few words and take long sips of water and then get into my flow.
Yeah.
I know that you mentioned earlier the role of sponsorship, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about sponsorship in your career and how that's shown up for you and just this idea of sponsorship. Because I think a lot of people convolute it with other forms of support.
Yeah, that's a great question and a really important topic. So, sponsorship is important, and there's plenty of data and research to show it. I've written many pieces about it, so I won't go into all the numbers now, but I will say the sponsorship is clearly shown to advance people's career and advance their salary growth faster than most other things. And when we talk about sponsorship, we have to distinguish it from mentorship, right? Mentorship,
Yes.
most of us know what that is, right? It's having someone typically more senior than us can be a sounding board, who can help us, who we can go to and ask questions to, right? That's a mentor. A sponsor is much more proactive in their support of you and your growth. It's someone who is, again, senior to you, but who is proactively looking for opportunities to help you grow. So that means they're talking about you in a positive manner in rooms that you are not in. It means that if they see an opportunity or a course or a conference that they think you should go to, they're going to proactively reach out to you and say, hey, you should think about this. This could help you. So it's more proactive and intentional. And so it's funny because I've had a couple conversations with women around my age in the industry over the past week. And every single one of us has talked about the role sponsors played in our growth of I had this amazing sponsor. And most of the time, by the way, they were men, senior males. I had an amazing Spencer Levy. Everybody knows him. He hired me in CRE. And from the day I started, he was and continues to be, literally ran into him. He continues to be a sponsor. I'll give you an example of what he did. When I told him that I was leaving the company and I was starting my own business, he said, I am so proud of you. That was the first thing he said to me. Last
Amazing.
week when I saw him, we took a photo together. And before he had even gotten on the plane to go to his next event, he had posted a photo on LinkedIn where he has tens of thousands of followers. It said, huge shout out to Melina Cordero. She's incredible. Her business is amazing. Check it out. He wrote this incredible post.
It was wonderful. I
It
read
was
it.
beautiful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is sponsorship, percent. And that is what helped me grow. And sponsorship isn't always tooting your horn, right? Sponsorship was also them sitting down and saying, hey, I see you struggling in this area. That's something you're really going to need to work on if you want to get here. So you have to find those sponsors. And statistically, I want to say this for all the women listening, statistically, women are under-sponsored. So fill that gap, get a sponsor. And for the men who are listening, especially the senior men, go tap a junior woman in your organization or a rising star in your organization and sponsor her. Get interested in her career, ask her what she wants, ask her what she needs, and help her make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you shared that story specifically because I think it's such a shining example of someone who is willing to use their platform, their relationships, connections, their credibility to boost your own signal out there. And I think as women, we will often look to do that for other people and sometimes not look for that ourselves. And so I guess I'd love to ask you if you have thoughts or ideas. Let's say a woman listening to this is within an organization and she's the only one. She might not have her peers to ask around who might be a good sponsor. How do you bridge that gap and have those conversations? Or how do you know if someone is sponsor material, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's not as simple as hopping on LinkedIn looking for profiles and then saying, will you be my sponsor?
Yes.
You also want to find someone who inspires you. You want to find someone who you can relate to on some level, who's also able to commit to that too. And there's some amazing people out there that maybe they just right now at their point in their career, they may have something going on in their personal life. They just can't commit to that. And so that's okay too. So if you go and ask someone to be your sponsor and they say no, don't be offended, right? Because it's a big haul. Now, it also doesn't need to be that formal. It doesn't need to be, will you sign this paper and agree to be my sponsor and this will last X number of time, right? It doesn't have to be that way.
Yes.
But what it can be is, hey, I really admire your career and what you've built, and in particular, XYZ. I've been thinking about this in context of my career. I would really love to grab a coffee with you. And you start with a coffee or you start with a Zoom. You start with that. And you see how the conversation goes. If they are leaning into thinking of, okay, I've got someone I'd like to connect you to, doing those things, that's when you know, okay, there's possibility here. And so keep going, say, I really enjoyed this conversation. This was really helpful for me. Would you be open to doing this maybe once every other month or once a quarter, right? So make that ask, get the consent, and then go from there. And by the way, you don't have to just do this with one person. The more the merrier. Depends how many coffees you can drink in a day and how much time you have to drink the coffees, but go. And actually, I really recommend having a couple sponsors, right? A team of people. who you have supporting you, because there will become times in your career when you have to make a decision. You have a choice to make, and you're going to ask for advice and thoughts, and everyone's going to give you a different opinion.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to learn to listen to your own gut and answer yourself, but it helps to have multiple perspectives. So that's
Yes.
my advice around sponsorship. If you are not sponsoring someone, who can you help today? And if you want to sponsor, start inviting some folks to coffee.
I love it. I love too just this idea that we should open our eyes as we are interacting. If you're a mid career or senior woman in the industry, the next conference you go to, when you're getting these LinkedIn DMs or cold emails from folks that might have went to your alma mater or were in the same sorority as you, thinking about, is this a person I have chemistry with? Is this a person I can see myself in? I think that's been the easiest for me to connect with folks if I'm either being a mentor or being a sponsor, is when I can see qualities of them or of myself in them. And I want also to save them from some of the mistakes and pitfalls and challenges that I experienced. I know is something that you believe strongly in too, that we should pay it forward and make it better for the next generation.
Yeah, and I will say, although maybe my inbox will get flooded after I say this, with rare exceptions, if someone, especially like a very junior person, especially if it's a woman or a
Yes.
person of color who's underrepresented in the industry, very rarely is it that someone will reach out to me and I will not agree to a Zoom or a chat or sending
Mhm.
resources. You lose nothing by helping
Mhm.
people. And obviously,
Yeah.
you need to hold boundaries around your time
Sure.
and your energy. So you can't overcommit yourself. But if I have the time, if I'm not traveling, I'll say, hey, yes. And how can I help you? What are you interested in? And I'm happy to chat. Another area where I'm really passionate about helping people is women who want to start their own businesses or women who want to
Okay.
leave their jobs, right? So the second a woman's, hey, I saw you made this big move. I've been thinking about something similar, but I just really love to pick your brain about some stuff. I'm a yes.
Mhm.
I am
Yeah.
100% a yes. So
Yeah.
just ask. Just ask. And
Yes.
I say that, and I don't take my own advice. I don't take that advice. I should be listening to myself. I'm not to listen to this podcast and listen to myself, pretend I'm someone else. Just ask.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who on Mondays, I think she calls it Ballsy Monday.
I
She
like it.
on Monday will make a list of people that she would love to be connected with, collaborate with, start friendships with, etc. And she takes at least one person off the list every Monday and she reaches out to them. And I
Mm,
think it's really smart to do because I'm like you, Melina. I'm really good at giving advice to other people and not necessarily always looking out for myself and thinking about what do I need in this next step in my career or whatever
yeah.
transition that I'm making. So I do think it's smart for us to figure out if there's a cadence. Like maybe I'm going to reach out to you on a weekly basis, one person that I admire and share with them. And I think of people as the potential to be not just in person mentors or Zoom mentors or coffee mentors, but there's also this idea that I have of a digital mentor. Like I might never meet some of these people whose content I follow, whose advice I'm implementing in my life, but I think the worst someone can say is no or not yet. And that's not a bad outcome. I think you've got to continue to up to the plate.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll find the right people for you.
Yeah, and I think along the way, another really great piece of advice that goes along with that is to be really, and I know this word is overused, but I'm going to use it anyways, be really authentic. And what I mean
Yes.
by that, authentic is different for everyone, right? But be
Yes.
you. Make sure that you're using your voice and your heart when you are connecting with people. I think you do a phenomenal job. I follow you on LinkedIn, and
Thank
I
you.
think that your posts are real, they're authentic, they're in your voice, they're conversational. And so it's interesting because you say you may never have met these people, but there are probably the people out there who feel like they know you personally
Yeah.
because the way that you communicate is authentic. So when you are reaching out to someone to say, hey, I really admire your work, be real about it. It can be uncomfortable to write something a little vulnerable, but don't chat GPT your
No.
way into
No.
relationship.
I think people love compliments. And I have noticed because I am a person who likes to compliment people a lot. I'll look for good things about people and recognize people when I can for different things, whether it's their social media content or just the way that they up on a podcast, whatever it is. I'm always looking for different ways to connect and compliment people.
Yeah.
And I noticed that people are starved for that kind of attention, unfortunately. And I think back to the love languages, there's a whole bunch of people out there who are words of affirmation people who are not getting or feeling the love. And if you, again, coming from this deeply authentic place, can even just spend 5 minutes understanding who this person is, what matters to them, and thinking about something unique and special to them that you can say, even if it's just, hey, I know you're a fan of this particular author. I wanted to share with you this podcast that I just listened to that highlight like that. That's not even a compliment, but you're taking a personal interest.
Yeah.
And I feel like that additional time spent, not a lot of people are doing that kind of thing. And it makes you really memorable and it makes you a person that people want to help and that people want to support in whatever way that might be. So.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the little things. When you're meeting people and you're putting them in your CRM or your Salesforce or whatever, can you add a little
Yeah.
note of likes cats, hates reality
Yes.
TV, went to Paris with her family last week, whatever those little
Yes.
things are. So yeah, be authentic, stand out in a world of shared ChatGPT prompts, the human voice. That's the
I appreciate what you said about my LinkedIn. I actually rarely, if never, use ChatGPT or Claude for my LinkedIn content because I do feel it's so important for it to sound like me and for people to have a consistent experience, whether they're hearing me speak on stage or they're reading a post that I wrote on social media or they're running into me at an airport. I want it to be consistent. And I'll tell you what, I had an experience yesterday actually where someone who I have respected and admired for the way that they show up online showed up in a very different way with me on the phone when I tried to reach out to them. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting because you have conveyed to me and to others this personality of humble and grateful for every interaction and connection and wanting to collaborate. And very quickly, the mask slipped, and I thought, you're not doing anybody any favor, like you're not doing yourself any favors. You think that you might be, but in the short term, people are going to remember that inconsistency and that trust is immediately destroyed. So even I think just doing the work of figuring out who you really are and what your values are and what's important to you and conveying that and putting that forward, I think really attracts the people who are meant for you and also helps you to sort out the people that are not.
It's such a great point, and I wanna add to that another layer, which is I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert who talks to a lot of people. I'm in an extroverted industry, get on stage, teach leadership development, right? So, one thing to say, if you're an introvert, that doesn't mean you don't have social skills and you can't present. Two is what I've found is these kinds of interactions and networking can be really draining
Yes.
when it's not your people.
Yes.
So, what I've found is I have always aboard networking, right? And
Yes.
conferences, I would walk home from a conference, and I had to be at a lot of conferences. I would walk
Uh-huh.
home to the hotel from a conference absolutely drained, like
Uh-huh.
no energy, lie on the bed, turn on Netflix, and just disconnect, drained.
Yes. Yes.
And now it's interesting because this week I've had 4 or 5 calls a day. I was
Uh-huh.
at 2 conferences last week. Highly social, interactive, people-focused work the past couple of weeks, and I feel very relaxed. I feel very calm. I feel very
Yeah.
motivated because I'm connecting with my people.
Yes.
And so I'd encourage you, and this may be a hard question to face, right? But if you are feeling like, ugh, around all
Uh-huh.
this, maybe you're barking up the wrong networking trees, right? Maybe you need to search for the interactions and the relationships and the conversations that feel easy,
Yes.
that feel natural,
Yeah.
because that's where you're going to get the most juice. Every time you and I talk, we could probably talk for
Yes.
hours, but when I finish the conversation, I don't feel exhausted. I feel like, oh my goodness, so many ideas, all the things we're going
Energized.
to do.
Yeah.
So find your people and connect with them.
Absolutely. I think it's such a great point, and I just want to hone in on it a little bit more and say that the conferences that you select are so important. I know you and I have connected at Globe Street Women of Influence, and I just want to shout them out for a second because they are incredible. They've actually just put out an article about Women Speak CRE and this platform and what we're trying to accomplish in getting more visibility for women in commercial real estate. I do think that environment, and I've been attending, this will be my fourth year in a row, is one where I come away and I am buzzing with enthusiasm and ideas and connections and potential collaborations. I've done business from that conference, and it's one of those good gut checks is how does it measure up to that? Because that's a peak experience for me. Beth Azor's Women Real Estate Investing Summit is another peak experience for me. And I think even just figuring out like, how can I go to 3 or 4 of these a year? How do I mix in as many of these types of events as possible? The energy, the creativity, the productivity that come out of conferences like that is generating a greater return than what I spend, whether that's economically or energetically. But I think
Yeah.
it's such an important point.
Yeah. And I would even expand that idea of trying different conferences, see how they fit,
Mhm.
to really talking about community. And that's something our mutual
Yeah.
friend and colleague Garland Fuller talks a
Yes.
lot about and does a lot of work around, is this idea of community. And the industry where we work, that's a community. And
Mhm.
so we can attend conferences that are in our sector, maybe cross sector, maybe tangential,
Uh-huh.
but we can also think about what are the other communities that we feel we belong to. And in that
Yeah.
sense, maybe there's a local entrepreneurs group in your community, local community that you can go to monthly events, cross stitching group. Maybe it's a soccer
Yeah.
club, whatever those communities are, don't discount them because that's community and that's connection. And you never know what can come of those interactions. I've made a lot of, because I've always been open when someone's, oh, would you mind talking to my friend who's moving here and you lived there? I said, sure. And I always say, sure. It's always fun. And I've
Uh-huh.
actually had business things come from that too. Open door.
And I was just trying to quickly Google the stat because there's a stat that I heard at a conference that absolutely blew my mind, in that it was a certain percentage. It was a really high percentage. I want to say it was something like 40 or maybe 50 or 60% of the business that a broker does. So, very specific to one part of our industry, comes from those natural networks, whether it's your church or your kids' little league or your alumni association, the Chamber of Commerce, all these different things that you're doing in your personal life represent a significant business development opportunity. I think too, I was just talking to my friend Carrie about how sometimes the people in our lives have no idea what we do, and how that's really a disservice because those people are out there and have their own kind of spheres of influence as well. And as much as possible, we need to let our friends and family know what we do and what we're excellent at. So as they're out navigating in the world, that they can also help us and be little, I guess, champions of us and our work when they're out there watching the soccer game or cross stitching. I love that
Mhm.
reference. Do you have any fun hobbies or any special communities that you're a part of that you want to share?
So it's been a while since I did this, but one community and hobby that actually really transformed my relationship with work when I was in the peak of sort of stress, intensity,
Yeah.
grind, all of that was salsa dancing. And
Ah,
yeah, it's one of my favorite stories. At a time when I was traveling every week, I barely had time to see my friends. I didn't have energy for anything outside of work. And I had just turned 30 and was sick of living a work and then nothing else life. And I said, all right, I'm
yeah.
going to push myself to try one new thing a week. And it could be little, it could be big. But in that year, I learned to kayak. I took boxing classes.
Wow.
I did all sorts. I hiked. I went camping for the first time. I did a bunch of stuff. One of the things that really stuck was salsa dancing. I fell in love from the first set. And it was something that was so different from my typical day to day and my pencil skirts and my clean whatever. All of a sudden, everyone's laughing. You're jumping around. You're making mistakes. And what was really special to me was I was meeting people and forming connections and relationships, and nobody knew how much money you made, what
Yeah.
your title was, where you worked. None of that mattered. And so it allowed me to really reconnect with my identity outside of work.
Yeah.
And something that was very physical. I think that's something that a lot
Uh-huh.
of us, especially women, but everyone, we spend a lot of time up here in our heads. We spend a lot of time thinking, overanalyzing again, wondering,
Yes.
worried. And It's taken several coaches I work with to really get me to embrace the fact that the only way out of your head is into your body. And
Mm.
so whether that means dancing, whether that means
Mhm.
jumping up and down, whether that means lying still for 5 minutes, whether that means getting a massage,
Yeah.
one of the most efficient ways out of that monkey brain, as they call
Yes.
it, is getting into your senses, getting into your physical, whatever. Maybe it's going for a run or a walk, but maybe it's also just lying down. It's reconnecting with your senses.
I love that. And I think too, a lot of us have these roles that we play in our lives as caretakers to others. And I
Yeah.
think oftentimes we will recognize and suggest those types of things to the people we love when they're in need. And I think, as our mutual friend Garland, who also loves salsa dancing, says, we sometimes have to put our own mask on before we put others' masks on. So remembering to take care of ourselves, to be in our bodies, to get self-care, whatever that means for us, I think important. I'd love to
Agreed.
transition to the last part of our conversation and talk about the leadership training that you are working on and some of the fun things that we are collaborating on
Yeah.
together.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked about what's driven me and my mission. And one of the things that drives my work, right, is how do we transform this industry? How do we transform our workplaces? And it's taken me a couple years to get to the absolute crystal clarity
Mhm.
that the fastest path to that is leadership development. And
Yes.
by that, I mean, we have, if you can split the industry into sort of three buckets, right? You have super senior executives
Mhm.
who can get an executive coach or they've worked their way up. They know what they're doing. Sometimes they don't. They're there. And then you
Yeah.
have the super junior folks who are coming in, and there are a lot of programs that exist, right? For mentorship, for internships, for that early career development, is we have this forgotten middle.
Mhm.
And that forgotten middle is probably the most important thing to any
Yes.
industry. There's a lot of
Yes.
research about what they call middle managers. But what I'm talking about here is next generation leadership. So those
Mhm.
rising stars who have been rising up through their career, it was me when I was
Mhm.
working up that ladder. What happens is we're thrown these challenges, we're thrown new situations, and we have zero support.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I can tell you, working for the largest company in the industry, when I went from running a
Mhm.
team of 1 to 500, I did not do any management training. I did not receive any management training. I got a
Yep.
coach, which was indispensable, but I thought to myself, if that's what's happening to me here,
Yeah.
there's a big old gap in this industry. And
Huge.
I also
Huge.
had the experience of working through the challenges of
Mhm.
learning on the fly, figuring it
Mhm.
out, making mistakes, doing things right, having to experience everything for the first time. And that is one way to learn, but it's
Mhm.
not the best way to learn. It's
Yes.
not
Yes.
the best way to learn. And my fear for this industry is that if we continue to grow people in that way, we're going to have a lot of burn and churn and we're going to have a lot of people leaving. And
Yes.
so when I thought about all of that, I said, we need to support that tier. And so I built
Mhm.
a leadership development program specific to CRE, which is called P20
Mhm.
Leadership. And you can go to the website, it's all there. But what it is a 10-month, 10 module, all online leadership development program that's been completely designed for commercial real estate. And so the idea is that participants get to be a part of a small group cohort of about 8 to 12, all within the industry. So the sort of peer networking opportunities are incredible. You can practice some of the networking and
Mhm.
relationship skills. And you go through these 10 topics, and these topics cover everything that I never got training on that I wanted to pass along to others. So it's
Yeah.
everything from impactful communication, but also public speaking and presentation skills, which is
Yes.
so vital to your
Yeah.
career and to your growth. It's also burnout and stress management, which I call resilience, right? It's called leadership
Mhm.
resilience. You need to
Yep.
learn that because the higher you go, the more stressors are going to exist. And if you don't have the tools to really manage that and take care of yourself, you're either going to burn out and leave or you're going to stay, but you're going to be miserable. So we need to
Yeah.
also address that. And then another module that's gotten a lot of attention recently is on AI and technology, right? So that's another thing. Nobody's teaching us how to use AI and
No.
tech, right? And if you're going to be a leader in this industry and you're going to lead the industry forward, AI literacy skills are going to be
Mhm.
game changers, right? And so I really wanted to be forward thinking with the content and the modules that we're teaching And the other element of the program that is so important, which has been important to me and so many other people in the industry, is coaching. Every single person who goes to the program gets not only the modules, gets not only access to the peer cohort, but also gets access to an executive coach who is certified.
Love
All
it.
of the coaches in the program that we have used to work in commercial real estate and continue to work with clients in the industry. This is my solution and my strategy to transform the industry, because I think if we can make better leaders,
Yes.
we can grow. A stat that I know you and I talk about all the time is
Yeah.
the opportunity is now, because 40% of the commercial real estate industry is due to retire in the next 10 to 15 years. So there's a
Yes.
challenge, which is how are we going to replace them with? But the
Yes.
opportunity is anybody who is in that middle, right? Now is the time to start strengthening and honing your leadership skills, because in
Yes.
about 10 years, there are going to be a lot of openings for very
Yes.
senior positions, and you want to get yourself ready.
Yes.
So the opportunity I really see is now, and my personal hope that those 40%, the seats in those 40% are backfilled with amazing leaders who are innovative, who are inclusive, who are forward thinking, and who do
Yes.
things differently. And so my contribution to this industry is to help make that happen.
I love it. I love it so much. And I applaud you for seeing a problem and a gap and working to address it with hands on tactical information and tools and all of that. I know that a portion of the program is going to be something that we make available to the Women Speak CRE community. And we'll have more information about that as we get closer. So I just want to tease that and preview it for our listeners. But last question, Melina, and it's been so amazing talking to you. And I am lucky enough to get this pleasure all the time, but this is a special treat to do it on the podcast. But last question is, what do you want the women listening to take away from your story?
Hopefully you take away a couple things, but if you're going to take away one thing that I want every woman to know and to really feel is that you are not alone. And what I mean by that is you are not alone in every sense. You have a community of women here, even if it's just this community of Women Speak CRE, who I would be willing to bet lots of money that every woman there wants to support other women
Yes.
in this industry. So you are not alone. There are tons of women who are out there who want to support you, want to see each other grow. I left a lucrative career to help other women grow. So there are a lot of us out there who are very committed to this. So you're not alone in that sense. And I also want you to know you're not alone in another sense, which is a little bit more personal. I think when I left the industry, nobody knew a lot of the suffering that I had gone through, and suffering with a little s, right? Nothing traumatic happened to me. I've been lucky in that sense, but the day-to-day stress, the microaggressions, the being ignored, the being undervalued or undermined or underpaid, all of those little things really add up. Not being confident or not feeling confident around decisions I made. Nobody really knew that. And what I found after I left and I quit and I started being more open about that is that my inbox was flooded with women, very senior women, who started to share with me that they felt the same way, that they suffered the same thing. And they started to share stories. And what really touched me was this idea that, wow, I spent all this time thinking it was just me. I spent all this time thinking I was just stressed out because I'm not good at managing my emails. It's funny that we're talking about this because I just released this morning the second part in a 3-part article series on burnout, on myth busting burnout. And I talk about this. Go check it out. It's on LinkedIn in my newsletter, which is called Uncomfortable Questions, which is fun, leadership questions. I'm talking a lot about burnout and breaking down the myths of that. If you are feeling exhausted and you're feeling symptoms of burnout, you're also not alone there, because the latest stats say almost 80% of the US workforce experiences burnout at some point in their career. So we need to be talking about these things. You're not alone. Even if you haven't heard it from anyone or you haven't shared it with anyone, you're not alone. The accompanying statement I would say is not just you are not alone, but it's not your fault and it's not you. You're not the problem.
Whew. Yes.
You felt that one,
I
right?
Allison of 5 or 6 years ago in corporate, hanging by a thread, needed to hear that. And I'm sure a lot of women listening to this podcast are nodding their heads and feeling what you're saying. I think, unfortunately, it is a somewhat universal feeling and experience that we go through. And I also think that part of us gathering together, part of us telling our stories and using our voices is going to be what creates the change that we're looking for, not just in our industry, but in the world. And so I really appreciate you joining me here on the spotlight to share your story with us. And I'm so excited for what's to come with P20 Leadership and the collaboration that we're working on together.
Yes. And so to take some of Allison's advice and ideas during this conversation, the sort of call to action I have for everyone after this is if something in this conversation touched you, if something in this conversation resonated, if something in this conversation made you pose a question, let us know. Tell Allison, tell me, and make that connection with us. Because I know I can speak for Allison when I say we are very open to that and we love connecting. And so practice right now after this conversation. Say something to us. It doesn't have to be a compliment, but it's better when it is, but just talk to us.
All compliments welcome. Inboxes are open.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melina. I appreciate you so much, and I'm so excited to have you here on the spotlight.
I'm so thrilled to be here and be a part of this community, and I'm so happy for everything that you've built and what you're building, continuing to build with Women Speak CRE. I think it is going to be an absolute game changer for this industry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. This conversation with Melina was one of my favorites ever. She is so on top of stats and what is happening as far as trends in our industry, and is doing the work to really make a difference for this middle and emerging tier of leaders within commercial real estate. I had so many great takeaways, and I hope you did too. And please, if you have questions for Melina or I, or thoughts or ideas or potential guests for future episodes of The Spotlight, don't hesitate to reach out to Allison at womenspeakcre.com. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. With your help, we can make this mission and this platform and this movement grow. We hope to see you soon on the next episode of the Women Speak CRE podcast, The Spotlight. We hope to see you soon on The Spotlight, a Women Speaks... We hope to see you soon on The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for joining us on The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. We appreciate you listening and can't wait to talk to you soon.